Countdown to Halloween, featuring Gregory Miller's Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales. Every night at exactly midnight, a new story will appear on StoryLink Radio's YouTube channel. You'll have 24 hours to listen, then it will disappear and the next one will appear. Plan to catch these each day or you'll miss one. Each story will be 2 to 13 minutes long. If you haven't already, be sure to listen to the introduction to the book right here on this channel. And now, tonight's story from Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales. October 26th, the lesson. Everyone needs someone or something to care about. Mel Winston had Katie. For her, that was enough. No one in the village knew exactly how old Mel was. She lived in the deep woods and didn't have any friends. And parents, when they saw her, warned their children not to go near her. But they needn't have bothered her, because she scared children, though she was only a child herself. Sometimes at night, those village parents, along with other grown-ups, they talked about her and the rest of the Winston family, usually at Ronnie's Tavern, and sometimes in the quieter corners or otherwise sleeping houses. The dark brought out the questions and stories the way it brings out bats and owls and other creatures that sleep by day. Words like fallen, inbred, unnatural, and abomination were rolled out whenever the Winstons were mentioned. Mr. and Mrs. Winston hadn't been seen in over a dozen years. No one could rightly say they were even still alive. But far, far down the back trail that led to the clearing, that led to another trail that supposedly led through the marsh to their shack. Piles of heads were sometimes found. Raccoon heads and beaver heads, squirrel heads, fox. And as long as those piles still appeared, folks figured it was best to keep away. They were more effective than any keep out of private property sign had ever been. Not even Sheriff Cowles ventured past them. But Mel Winston, she still came to town now and then. There was no rhyme or reason as to when, just as there was no accounting for the tattered baby carriage she always pushed along in front of her. "Look at the people, Katie," she would say, pointing at whoever happened to be walking by, usually on the other side of the street. "Look at the flowers," and she'd peer into the carriage and coo. "See them? Aren't they lovely now? Aren't they beautiful?" she'd say. Made everyone terribly uncomfortable, seeing a young thing with the tangled blonde hair and a filthy white dress talking to that baby carriage. They spoke of that, and of her wide, staring green eyes. She looked lost and pathetic, but they knew better than to try and help. Once Mabel Fulton had crossed the street with a muttered, "Bless her heart," and tried to give her a piece of candy and $1. The old lady lost a sizable clump of scalp and hair, and gained only a long, livid scratch down her cheek for her efforts. This went on for about 10 years, from when the Winston girl was perhaps 7 to 17, give or take. Over the course of that decade, she added a pervasive sense of unease to the town, a token darkness to remind its citizens, either consciously or on a more subtle, intuitive level, that the quiet joys of backyard barbecues and evening lemonade-flavored talk on the front porch didn't exist without corresponding shadows. And then, shortly before Mel disappeared, the whole village elected a new mayor. He was driven and motivated in a way reserved only for optimistic young politicians, especially ones in small towns. In his first year alone, Dwayne Larson established themed fair days, fishing contests, and annual stocking in the Whittier Pond, community barbecues, and not associated with any church, to the consternation of many. The 9-hole golf course and new litter laws. He also established, through a grant with the state, a series of nature trails meant to complement the golf course and encourage the possibility of future campgrounds. That meant a series of topographical surveys and excursions into the countryside by men and women with notebooks and odd electronic devices, and eventually working crews, one of which was instructed to form a trail near the springs that ran down the ridge by the long-shunned Winston property. Only 4 from the 9-person crew actually saw the property, and virtually nothing of the trail had been completed when they happened upon it. There should have been warnings, some said later, though what that might have accomplished can never be known. What those 4 people saw late in the afternoon of October 26th has been talked about in night whispers and hushed tones at Ronnie's ever since. So often and so earnestly, the story even gives the gossip about Mel Winston herself a run for its money. It all hinges on the account of Joseph Hull, a cranky and creaky farmer who lives out that way, and who, as chance would have it, was home eating a solitary supper when a frantic pounding sounded on his front door. The lady named Ruth was beside herself, Hull said. It still says if you catch him in the right mood. All scratched up and bloody, clothes torn and tattered, and her eyes was wide so you could see the whites all round, and she was breathing real hard, all panicked and upset. Well, I brought her in and gave her some coffee, he said. But she only drank but a sip. She kept saying, they took 'em, they took 'em. Who? I asked her, and then she told me. I guess she and 3 men was out past the marsh, planning out a path for that dummy Larson's and nature thing. They was up on the ridge and walking merrily along when they spotted the Winston shack down below. It looked empty, but there was that baby carriage out front, and something making noise from it. So they got curious and kind of worried and went down to see nearer. Ruth said that up close it was a nasty place. Had a terrible smell to it, and there was bones littering the yard. But they kept on because of that carriage and the noise coming from it. Well, they got not a dozen feet from the front door when that Mel girl burst out from it with a shriek and threw herself on one of the fellers. Ruth said it was all over fast, and Mel Winston snapped his neck like a twig and ripped out his throat with her teeth. And then she came for the others. But she didn't take more than a step or two, and the shack, it shuddered from bottom to top and back again, and an awful stink and noise rose up from it. That stopped Mel Winston cold. No, Ma, I ain't taking 'em all. Promise. And then 2 gray arms like octopus he's got, they slid out from 2 empty windows and snatched the other 2 men fast and tight. Quick as you can slap a gnat, they was gone. Pulled right through those windows and into the darkness. And they screamed like fury, but that didn't last long. Well, that just left Ruth, and she was bolted to the spot, and if she's to be believed, who can lay blame on her for that? You, Mel Winston told her, eyeing her up and down. I guess you'll do for Katie. You want to meet her? When Mel Winston, she stepped over to that old baby carriage, and she whisked off the dirty blanket. But it weren't no baby the Roo saw come out of it. More like a spider the size of a full-grown cat, all gray and covered in hair. And it made a squeal as it unfolded and went for Ruth. But that's when she finally got the wits back and ran. She ran and she ran and she kept on running all the way to my front door. Poor child. And she learned something most to do well to soak up sooner rather than later in life. Yeah, there's some dark places best left be. Our esteemed ex-mayor should have taken notes on that too, all things considered. One day later, Mayor Larson was found dead and bloated in his bed. No autopsy reports regarding the tragedy ever been made available. Yeah, old Mel Winston's baby carriage was found, empty and abandoned in his front yard. She was never seen or heard from again either. Well, the death of one person and the disappearance of 3 others, and outsiders at that, could not be overlooked. And the state police, well, it descended in great numbers on the Winston property, all right. And every inch of it, as well as the surrounding countryside, is picked over with a fine-tooth comb. But nothing was ever found. And not even the shack, which, along with hundreds of square yards of land, had been burned by fire so hot it glassed up some of the nearby rocks. Well, as for the village, not much has changed for us, save for an occasional influx of out-of-town paranormal thrill seekers or other strangers with more casual curiosity. But we don't say much to them, save to pass along Joseph Hull's advice. Most of us hadn't before. We all lock our doors at night now. Windows too. Some still complain about it, but those few are all given a version of the same answer. It's a real shame, but these days, even in a small town, one can't ever be too careful. You've just heard tonight's story from Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales from author Gregory Miller. You can get this book right now on Amazon at the on-screen link, and Kindle Unlimited users can borrow a copy of the book for free. You can learn more about Gregory Miller and his many amazing books and projects at his website, On Screen. If you have not already, be sure to listen to our event video here and visit our event website to learn all about our upcoming events. Remember to come back after midnight for our next tale. Oh, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for StoryLink Radio.